Union Cemetery here in Placerville, California, wasn't one of the earliest cemeteries. It was actually, it didn't get, the land for it didn't get purchased until 1871, plus or minus a year there. It got formed, I think, the following year. And the group that bought it was a group of 4 fraternal orders as a place to put their members. The Masons were probably the largest, but the Druids were right up there. And so we are currently sitting in the Druid section of Union Cemetery, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the Druids and about how they even got to Placerville, because the reason they're here is buried right over there, Frederick Seig. The Druids arrive in Placerville in roughly 1860. This guy, Frederick Seig, he was a Druid in St. Louis, and he's out here, and he wants to start up a grove, which is what they call their local organizations. The fraternals were very popular in the 1800s in this country. There was no such thing as insurance. If you went to a lodge and faithfully paid your weekly dues, they took care of your wife and kids if you got killed at work, for example. So many of the fraternals were based on that model. Some offered nothing else, in fact, or very little else, by way of philosophy or philanthropy. But the Druids were very big in all the above. This guy, Frederick Seig, is a big man in the community. He is the head of the local grove. He becomes the head of the state organization. And the Druids actually come back and bury him in the beautiful monument we're about to look at in some detail.
We're non-sectarian, so where some of the other orders, it's a specific religion, this one is just whatever you feel the supreme creator is to you. Below that is the flame, and that's symbolizes the light of truth over darkness, and it's the light of knowledge. And then you have a spear and a pruning hook. The ancient Druids collected mistletoe, and so they had a ceremonial pruning hooks for gathering the mistletoe. This is a sprig of mistletoe and a sprig of oak. And then the dolmen was a Druid symbol as well. So in some pictures it appears as an altar, others it appears as a dolmen. And the dolmen was the gateway to other worlds. And when you passed on, you would go through the gateway into the spiritual world. The oak symbolizes strength, knowledge, and the mistletoe is evergreen, so it was a symbolized life. So even in the winter time, that was green, so it was always a symbology of humanity clinging to the knowledge and strength of the oak tree.
So the Druids actually, the whole fraternal, after World War II, the fraternals died out dramatically, everywhere actually. They're sort of making a comeback now, but they're having a hard time attracting young people, as you might imagine. But so the local grove disintegrated at some point in the last 40 years, but is now trying to reform. And they still come here. The whole state is here represented every year, and they come out to a service at this monument.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. We're going to start a few things here we want to say about Frederick Seig, a little bit about the cemetery. But before we get into that, I just wanted to introduce who we have up here today. Right here to my left is Henry Baker. Henry is the current Noble Grand Arch of the United Age of Druids of California. You can applaud if you want. Or not. Next to Henry, we have John Rainwater. John is the Grand Treasurer to the Grand Grove of California.
There's John.
We have a very lovely lady next to him. That would be my wife, Tracy Stevens. Tracy is the Grand First Bard to the Grand Circle of California. And then our chauffeur, anytime we go to Bakersfield, is Mr. John Portillo. John Portillo is the Grand Herald to the Grand Grove. In the audience, we do have some other officers as well. We have John Zini sitting down here. He is the Grand Secretary to the Grand Grove, and he's also the co-chair of this event for today. Blame me for this. Next to John, his lovely wife Bonnie Zini is a past Grand Archdruidess for the California Grand Circle. And the person that looks the most like a Druid is our brother Forrest Bryson. Forrest is the Grand Marshal to the Grand Grove of California. And he always wins the best beard contest. And not to be left out because you brought your fez today, we have Ray Morgan from Santa Rosa. He is the noble arch of that particular grove in California. Placerville Grove number 1 in attendance. We have Mr. Dan Gray. Could you just wave your hand? There's Dan. We have David Price. David's down there. And then John Rainwater is also a member of Placerville Grove number 1. And then I understand we have a proposed brother, Brother Shane, brother to be Shane. And I'm Jim Stevens. I'm the Grand Historian this year for the California Grand Grove.
Hey.
So I just want to mention a little bit about the Placerville Cemetery, although we do have some experts in the audience that can probably tell you more about that than I can. Originally it was developed in 1871, and it was meant for a place for the Masons, the Independent Order of Oddfellows, Independent Order of Redmen, and the California Grove of the United Ancient Order of Druids to have plots for their members. It was laid out on about 2.45 acres on the south side of D Street. In 1895, the Knights of the Pythian acquired 1.5 acres adjacent to the original cemetery at the lower end. In 1931, the Native Sons of the Golden West acquired 0.381 acres. The Fraternal Order of Foresters, number 889, also acquired about 0.4 acres. So there's a lot of different plots in this area. So we happen to be in the Druid section right here, right now. In 2005, the city and the county of El Dorado reached an agreement whereby the county would accept responsibility for the grounds maintenance, plus the sale of plots and internments. The city would pay for water and public safety, and the land was deeded to the county in October of 2006. That's probably enough about the history of the cemetery for now. Mr. Brother Henry Baker here will read a little bit about our founder, Frederick Seig, and then we will continue down the road.
So in 1892, the original monument over Frederick Seig's grove, he passed away in 1888, had fallen into disrepair. So they got a committee together to make a new monument, and then there was a dedication to the monument, and this eulogy was read, and I'll read the eulogy. It was by Brother M. Mayer. He was the past Arch of California Grove number 1, and he delivered it at the dedication of the monument that was erected over Frederick Seig's grave on July 24th, 1892. In part, Brother Mayer said, It has been the custom in all ages to honor the illustrious dead for the great deeds and valuable services rendered during their lifetime. Columbus, the discoverer of this continent, was cast in prison as a reward for his service, but his name will never be forgotten. Fraternal organizations have their heroes whom the members of the order hold in high esteem. Look at the works of Thomas Widely, the founder of the Odd Fellows. He also had a part in the founding of the Druids. The Masonic fraternity honors the name of one of the greatest architects who helped design and construct the Solomon Temple. These men are not honored for victories on bloody battlefields, nor for the deeds of national greatness, but for the love to their suffering fellow men, for their sympathy and help rendered to the sick and distressed, and for having cheered the brothers and sisters in time of adversity. We as Druids are also assembled here today in honor of the founder of the Druidic Order in California, and to dedicate this monument erected to his memory by the Brotherhood of the State as a token of love and esteem for his labor of charity and the relief of sick and distressed members of the order he founded. Brother Frederick Seig was born in Saxony, Germany in the year 1815. At an early age, he was left as an orphan and was taken in charge by one of his uncles, who apprenticed him as a baker. His faithless honesty and industry made him beloved by his employer. Being in the years when life is most vigorous, he, like many other young men of the old world, bade farewell to the land of his birth and crossed the ocean to seek a home in this land of the free and the home of the brave. He arrived safely in St. Louis, where he engaged in business and soon prospered as a result of honesty and good habits. But through the treachery and dishonesty of his partner, he was later financially wrecked. John, you will carry on from there.
In the year 1850, he became a member of the Teutonic Grove No. 2 in St. Louis by initiation. The members recognized his ability and fidelity to the order, elected him secretary to the Grove. Due to the attention to his duties, his membership of the Grove was doubled in 1 year. About the year 1853, when the rush to the goldfields was in full sway, which event was heralded since 1848 and 49 to the entire world, and which brought to these golden shores representatives from every part of the globe. We find our brother also among them, seeking a fortune to this state. After several successful years in the occupation of a miner, he settled in Placerville and established himself in business, in which he prospered for many years. His trust in false human nature almost caused his financial ruin in later life. His hospitality and upright conduct were the bywords of his friends and acquaintances. The door of his tent was always open to a friend or brother in distress, but too often his liberality was shamefully abused by pretended friends. His only fault was that he could never decline a request made upon him. He could never say no when asked for loans or endorsements for notes for others. He believing in all men to be as honest as he was, but in that he realized too late to have been mistaken. The first attempt at organizing the Druidic order on the Pacific coast was made by Pastor Hayden at Sacramento. He had secured the signature of 35 charter members, but as communications with the East often required from 3 to 4 months, progress was slow. During the transmission of the dispensation, the city of Sacramento was laid in ashes. The applicants were scattered to every part of the state, and this first attempt to establish Druidism proved a failure. This attempt was made in 1851. The second one was made in 1852 by Brother Adam Keel, a past Arch of Harmony Grove No. 5 in St. Louis, Missouri. This brother arrived in San Francisco with the necessary documents for the establishment of the order of the city. But as all attention was given to mining industries, he also failed. He met Brother Seig 2 years later and told him of his failure to establish at least one grove in San Francisco. The third successful attempt was made in 1860 by Brother Frederick Seig. It was a hard task for him, but he never gave up until his work was accomplished, and when the grove was finally made ready to be instituted, his brothers of St. Louis sent him a transfer card accompanied with the best wishes and complimented him for his achievements. Brother Seig caused notices to be published in the Mountain Democrat, calling upon all brethren holding legal Druidic cards to forward them to him. In response, 2 cards were sent to him, one from Henry Wolfe, right over here, and who had been a life companion of the founder. These 2 men are both united in death in the same grave. The second card was from Brother Henry Lurk. As the law of the order required 7 already made Druids to open a grove, a dispensation had to be obtained to make 4 more petitioners Druids at sight. And thus, the required number was obtained. On the 7th day of May, 1860, California Grove No. 1 was instituted in Placerville by him. He having been appointed a special deputy by the most noble Grand Arch of the Grand Grove of the United States, such was the way the seed of Druidism was planted in this golden state, which has grown to be a strong oak. Herman Grove No. 2 was organized in the town of Coloma, where gold was first discovered by Marshall. And San Francisco Grove No. 3 was organized on March 27, 1864 in San Francisco. These 3 groves were organized and instituted by Frederick Seig. We are not in the position to give all the names of the brothers who were initiated by the institution of the California Grove No. 1, but we are fortunate enough to be able to insert in the history of the names of the 7 Druids required by law in order to obtain the charter of dispensation. They were Frederick Seig, Henry Lurk, Heinrich Wolf, George Nuss, Klaus Heinrich Baumann, Xavier Kaiser, and Louis van Geistenfeld. Frederick Seig died in Placerville, California, August 14th, 1888.
Tracy Stevens is going to say a little bit about Caroline Seig.
Mrs. Seig. Caroline Seig was born in 1813 and passed away in 1904. We cannot pass on without mentioning Frederick's devoted wife, who was left to mourn his death. Frederick Seig, through his goodness and overconfidence in mankind, died a poor man, and his wife, being very old, was placed in the Crocker Old People's Home, where she died May 11, 1904, at the age of 91. The Grand Grove paid her a yearly allowance, and it was customary for every noble Grand Arch to visit her during his incumbency. The gentle old lady was bedridden and totally blind for many years, yet she was always cheerful and spoke with reminiscence about her husband. Noble Grand Arch, I have no idea because he's Guglielmani, was the last Noble Grand Arch to see her alive. She died during the late George Beck's term of office, and at the expense of the Grand Grove, the remains were taken to Placerville and laid alongside those of the man she loved in life and cherished memory in death.
My brother John Portillo is going to read just a small section of one of our cemetery rituals. It's going to be a poem.
Sunset and evening star, and one clear call for me, and may there be no morning of the bar when I put out to sea, but such a tide as moving seems to sleep, to fall far from sound or foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home, twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell, when I embark from out the bound of time and place. The tide may bear from far. I hope I see my pilot face to face when I cross the bar.
We are ever in the presence of the great mystery of life and death. Our days are one continuous contest with the fierce whirring waves of the stern ebbing tide that without distinction of race, rank, or riches bears all away on its bosom to the magic isle of the blessed. The globe itself and all that is within or upon it shall dissolve and join the churchyard of cosmic dust. But faith, hope, and love are not the prisoner of the tomb. They are the beacon's light on the shores of human aspirations. Older than history, beyond the gulf of antiquity, through the mist of tears blows the hope of life everlasting. The hope of immortality has made of death a starlight way between the companionship of yesterday and the reunion of tomorrow. Love is the North Star that guides the pathway of the mariner over the dark, uncharted spaces of death to the promised land of wisdom and justice, beauty and truth, in the republic of friendship and brotherly love. That concludes our procession for the day. Thank you very much for attending.
When we got here, where your city hall is, there was an abandoned building there. Did you see that one? And
I'll come over here.
he took possession of it, squatted, and under California squatters' rights, he obtained ownership of the building. And then he, being an apprentice baker back in his homeland, he opened a bakery shop. And I think that turned out to be a little more work than he wanted. And in this town, he ended up getting some billiard tables and opened a saloon. And then pretty much got rid of the bakery and ran the saloon and the billiards. And if you bought a beer, you could get a free sandwich or a free hard-boiled eggs, a little lunch. So that's how they did things back then. The beer was worth more than the food.
You betcha.
And then, so it was originally a one building, one floor masonry building, and they ended up putting a second story on it. And after his death, it became a hotel. St. Francis, yeah. But originally, there was a basement, and that's where the tables were underneath, and that's where the very first Druids met, were down in the basement under the saloon.
And they also place a monument to him in downtown Placerville at the base of Cedar Ravine Road. And there you'll see a big tower with an eternal flame at the top and some very nice plaques and a few symbols on there. And that was the first thing that the immigrants would see when they entered into Placerville. You know, if they made it to Placerville, they made it. It was like the light of liberty type of thing. The Druids are back, and if you contact the state organization, you can probably join the newly forming Placerville Grove.